Today, we are diving into the very beginning of English literature. And this isn't just a story about dusty old books, no. It's a story about the birth of a culture, the very real threat of it being completely wiped out, and its incredible, miraculous survival against all odds. So our story really kicks off with an ending. Imagine this. For nearly 400 years, Britain was a part of the Roman Empire. They built roads, towns, the whole shebang. But by the year 410, the Roman Empire was in trouble. The legions packed up and just left, and they left behind this giant power vacuum. This time is often called the Dark Ages, not because people were unenlightened, but because our historical records from then are so thin. It was, for the island of Britain, a total reset. And that really is the question at the heart of our story today. What actually happens when the order, the language, the laws of a superpower just vanish? Who or what is going to rush in to fill that void? Well, into that void came new people, Germanic tribes from across the sea. You've probably heard of them, the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. They started to arrive on the shores, and they weren't just raiders, they were settlers. They were the ones who would lay the groundwork for a completely new culture, a new language, a new identity, on what was basically a blank page of history. And you really can't overstate how huge this change was. They didn't just move in, they remade the place in their own image. In fact, it was the Angles who gave their name to this new home, Angleland, which, as you can guess, eventually smoothed out to become England. The country's name itself is a fossil from this incredible time. So, what was this new Anglo-Saxon world actually like? Well, picture this. A world of warriors and kings where your loyalty to your lord was everything, and everyone believed in the power of fate. Their history, their laws, their stories, none of it was written down. It was a completely oral culture, performed and passed on from one generation to the next in the smoky warmth of these great mead halls. And the difference between what was there before and what came after, well, it's like night and day. The Romans left behind Latin, a system of written laws, a network of roads, a culture of imperial order. The Anglo-Saxons brought something totally different, a language that would become our modern English, a society built on fierce personal loyalty, and a deep, almost chilling belief in the power of fate, which they called Wyrd. And the most important person in this spoken world was the sculp. Okay, think of the sculp as a combination of a historian, a news anchor, and an absolute rock star. These were the keepers of the tribe's memory. They were the ones who sang the epic poems about heroes and monsters, making sure the great deeds of the past were never, ever forgotten. They were, and I mean this literally, the walking, talking libraries of an entire culture. Now, for centuries, this is how it worked. It was all about the spoken word. But then a revolution arrived. Around the year 597, Christian missionaries came to England, and they brought with them not just a new faith, but a truly game-changing new technology, writing. And this is the crucial part to understand. This wasn't just a religious change, it was a technological one. All of a sudden, there were books. The church needed its written scriptures, so it needed scribes. Monasteries became these hubs of learning, the first libraries. And these monks, they realized the incredible cultural value of the world around them. So they began this monumental task of listening to the scops and writing down the great pagan epics, preserving them in the people's own language, Old English. But right as this amazing rescue mission was getting started, a new threat appeared on the horizon. And it was one that would nearly wipe this entire literary world off the face of the earth. The timing, honestly, could not have been worse. Yup, starting in 793, Viking longships began to raid the English coast. And what were their primary targets? The monasteries. They were wealthy, they were poorly defended, and they were the only places where books were being kept. These raids were a cultural catastrophe. Every time a monastery burned, it was like taking a flamethrower to a civilization's hard drive. Priceless, irreplaceable literature just turning into ash. And the result of all that destruction it's just staggering. Out of what must have been this huge, rich ocean of oral poetry, almost everything that survives today, the epics, the poems, the riddles, is found in just 4 manuscripts. 4 books. That is it. That is how close we came to losing everything. And these 4 treasures are the bedrock of English literature. You've got the Junius Manuscript, which retells Bible stories like they're warrior epics. There's the Exeter Book, full of haunting poems like The Wanderer and these really clever riddles. Then there's the Vercelli Book, a mix of poetry and prose. And finally, the most famous of all, the Beowulf Manuscript. These 4 books are pretty much our only windows into that lost world. So what kind of stories are we talking about? Well, the main event was a genre we call heroic poetry. This was the Scots' bread and butter. These poems were all about celebrating these larger-than-life heroes, their superhuman feats in battle, and the values that held that whole society together: courage, loyalty, and the desperate search for fame that would outlive your own death. And the undisputed heavyweight champion of all Anglo-Saxon heroic poetry is, of course, Beowulf. Its survival is an absolute miracle. It is the only complete epic poem we have from any of the ancient Germanic languages. It's not just the first great work of English literature. It's our single best window into the entire mindset of the Germanic heroic age. And the story itself is just epic in its simplicity. There's this terrifying monster, Grendel, who's been attacking a Danish mead-hall. A great hero, Beowulf, hears about it and sails over to help. He fights the monster in hand-to-hand combat, then he dives into a monster-infested swamp to fight its mother, and then, 50 years later, as an old king, he gives his life to save his people from a fire-breathing dragon. It is the hero's journey, pure and simple. So, why should we care? Why does any of this matter? I mean, these are ancient stories saved by a handful of monks over 1,000 years ago. Well, because that world, even though it's long gone, isn't entirely lost. Its echoes are still all around us. I mean, for one, the very map of England is an Anglo-Saxon document. Essex, Sussex, Wessex, these are just the old territories of the East, South, and West Saxons. Even the name English comes from the Angles. The most basic building blocks of our geography and language are a direct inheritance from them. And this description of a hero really gets to the core of their world: bravery, generosity, and this powerful, overwhelming desire for a legacy. You have to remember, in a world without writing, the only immortality you had was in the songs the Scots sang about you after you were gone. Your reputation was literally everything. And that brings us to a final thought experiment. If every book, every server, every phone in the world disappeared tomorrow, what stories would we choose to remember? What deeds would we think are worth passing down? The Anglo-Saxons show us that what a culture chooses to save and how it chooses to save it, well, that's the very thing that defines it.